Shalom Mashpaka, greetings to you in the name of Yahusha HaMashiach. To all the 12 tribes who are scattered to the ends of the earth, greetings to you. So today I'm going to touch base upon briefly on understanding the Torah of divorce and remarriage. Alright, so this note explains the spiritual depth of Deuteronomy chapter 24 verses 1 to 4, moving beyond its surface level instructions on divorce to reveal a profound narrative of covenant, redemption, and transformation. So, by examining the Hebrew terms and their spiritual significance, it connects the physical act of divorce to Yahuah's relationship with YasharEL, portraying Yahusha as the ultimate husband who fulfills Torah through an oath-bound act of divorce and remarriage. So, the text underscores the transition from carnal to spiritual, illustrating how Yahuah's covenant with his people is renewed through Yahusha, who bears the crookedness of his bride to reconcile her to himself. So let's start off by reading Deuteronomy chapter 24 verses 1 to 4. When a man takes a wife and marries her, and it happens that she finds no favor in his eyes because he has found some unseemly thing in her, and he writes her a certificate of divorce and puts it in her hand and sends her out from his house. Verse 2, and she goes forth from his house and goes and becomes another man's wife. Verse 3, and the latter husband hates her and writes her a certificate of divorce and puts it in her hand and sends her out of his house. Or if the latter husband dies who took her to him as his wife, then verse 4 says, then her former husband who sent her away may not take her again to be his wife, after which she has been defiled. For this is an abomination before Yahuah, and you shall not bring sin on the land which Yahuah your Elohim gives you as an inheritance. So when we read Torah on the surface, we see an instruction which seems to be a way out of marriage in appeasing the flesh, in getting another wife. But those who have been spiritually awakened understand the Torah of life is hidden in the letter, and the letter kills, but the Ruach gives life. The Yahudis understood Torah after the flesh, and that is why it was to them the Torah of sin and death, Hata and Mut. So the Abari word for certificate or scroll, record or count is safar. It's a document or record written on a sheet of skin or papyrus and rolled up. Also means scribe, tell, declare, number, count, show, write or speak, account, commune, reckon, talk. Strong's H5608. Alright, same word is used. The word for divorcement or divorce is kariyatut, as cut off from the husband, a cutting off or down of anything, often used as a cutting of the covenant, in the sense that the sacrificial animal is cut in half. So when we read Yahu chapter 34 verses 17 and 18, it says, therefore thus says Yahuah, you have not obeyed me in proclaiming release, each one to his brother and each one to his neighbor. See, I am proclaiming release to you, declares Yahuah, to the sword, to the pestilence, and to the scarcity of food, and I shall make you a horror to all reigns of the earth. Verse 18, and I shall give the men who are transgressing my covenant, who have not established the words of the covenant which they made before me, when they cut the calf in two and passed between the parts of it. So if you see the word karat is the same root word in kariyatut, which means divorcement. Alright. So to understand Yahu chapter 34 verses 17 and 18, let me take you through the covenant which Yahuah made with Abraham. Alright, when Abraham cut the animals, he was instructed to cut the animals in two parts, and smoking oven and a flaming torch passed between those pieces. And what is that significance to what Yahuah is telling us in Yahu chapter 34 verses 17 and 18. So when we straight away turn on to Genesis 15 verses 17 and 18, we read, and it came to be when the sun went down and it was dark, that see, a smoking oven and a burning torch passed between those pieces. Those pieces are the pieces of the animals. In the day cut out a covenant with Abraham, in that day, Yahuah cut out a covenant with Abraham, saying, I have given this land to your seed from the river of Mizraim to the great river, the river Euphrates. So when Yahuah made a covenant with Abraham, he passed through those animal pieces that Abraham cut off the animals as a smoking oven and a burning torch between those pieces. So the word, if you see Yahuah, which is Strong's H1931, is a looking toward another. So also translated as that, him, same, this, he, which, who, such, wherein, be it one. Strong's 1931, 1932, alright, speak of the same word, hua. Alright, it's a looking from one direction to another. Okay, so what was Yahuah looking at? Yahuah was looking at towards that day. So that day, alright, referring to the renewed Jerusalem, when he would cut out a covenant with Abraham in giving the promised land to his seed. Now if you see Stephen in his testimony, alright, it's very clear when he says that Yahuah didn't give Abraham even a foot of the promised land. So if you read Acts chapter 7 verses 3 to 5, it says, and said to him, come out of your land and from your relatives and come here into a land that I shall show you. Then he came out of the land of the Kasdim, that is Chaldees, and dwelt in Haran. And from there, after the death of his father, he removed him to this land in which you now dwell. Verse 5, and he gave him no inheritance in it, not a foot of it, but he promised to give it to him for a possession and to his seed after him, when as yet he had no child. Alright, so Abraham was given this covenant when he had no child. Alright, Ishak was not yet born, even Ishmael was not yet born. That's the time Yahuah made a covenant with Abraham. Alright, and if you see Hebrews chapter 11 verses 9 to 10 tells us that Abraham looked at the promise as futuristic. Alright, that is in renewed Jerusalem, that is a city whose builder and maker is Elohim, and hence he sojourned the promised land a stranger, dwelling in tents with Ishak and Jacob, the heirs of the same promise. So when we read Hebrews chapter 11 verses 8 and 9, this is what it says, by belief Abraham obeyed when he was called to go out to the place which he was about to receive as an inheritance, and he went out not knowing where he was going. By belief he sojourned in the land of promise as a stranger, dwelling in tents with Ishak and Jacob, the heirs with him of the same promise, for he was looking for the city having foundations whose builder and maker is Elohim. So Abraham looked at the promise as spiritual and futuristic, because he was seeing from Yahuah's eyes. Remember that word which I spoke about, hua, right? Looking toward another. So that's the reason Yahusha said that Abraham, when he saw my day, he rejoiced. Right? Because he was looking at that day as the futuristic. The seed, the promised seed was Mashiach. The promise was not to many seeds, the emissary shawl says, but to the seed, Yahusha HaMashiach, who would come from the lineage of Abraham. Alright, through him, the inheritance will be given in the renewed Jerusalem, which will come from above. So he was looking at the promise as futuristic. Alright. So the smoking oven and flaming torch between the pieces was done by Yahuah himself, showing he will cut out the covenant in himself on that day. That is, Yahusha said, Abraham saw my day and rejoiced. John chapter 8 verses 56. So coming back to Yirmiyahu chapter 34 verses 8 to 11 and 17 to 20, we read that the Yahudites didn't proclaim release as in a Shemitah to their brother or neighbor. So there is no mention of anywhere in Torah or elsewhere that YasharEL or Yehuda cut out animals and passed through them to make a covenant. The only instance is of Abraham, which they may have replicated to make a covenant with Yahuah and the people in proclaiming release to their brethren, that is obeying the Shemitah laws. So if you see these verses, I'll read out a few verses. Yirmiyahu chapter 34 verses 8 to 11. the word which came to Yahu from Yahuah after sovereign Sidkiyahu had made a covenant with all the people who were at Jerusalem to proclaim release to them. Verse 9, that everyone was to set free his male and female slave, the Hebrew man and the Hebrew woman. No one was to keep a Yahudi, his brother, enslaved. Verse 10, and when all the heads and all the people who had come into the covenant heard that each one was to set free his male and female slaves and not keep them enslaved any longer, they obeyed and released them. But afterwards they changed their mind and made the male and female slaves to return, whom they had set free, and brought them into subjection as male and female slaves. So this was a grave sin which they committed. And if you see the text in Genesis chapter 15, this is what it portrays, because Abraham was told that your seed will be in captivity in Mitzrayim, all right, for 400 years. Read those preceding verses, all right, and it talks about that darkness that they will go through, but Yahuah moving through those pieces, all right, will cut out a covenant with Abraham's seed in bringing them out of that enslavement and setting them free in Yahusha HaMashiach. So the promise was spiritual, all right. The promise was pointing to the Jubilee, the setting apart, the Shemitah and the Jubilee, where the slavery will be ended in the release of the captivity of Yahuwah's people. So that's what it means. And here Sidkiyahu gave a command to the people in Yehuda to let go of his male and female slaves, but later on they changed their mind and brought them back into captivity. So it was a very grave sin. And here verse 17 to 20 it says, therefore thus said Yahuwah, you have not obeyed me in proclaiming release, each one to his brother and each one to his neighbor. See, I am proclaiming release to you, declares Yahuwah, to the sword, to the pestilence, and to the scarcity of food. And I shall make you a horror to all reigns of the earth. And I shall give the men who are transgressing my covenant, who have not established the words of the covenant which they made before me, when they cut the calf in two and passed between the parts of it. Verse 19, the heads of Yehuda and the heads of Jerusalem, the eunuchs and the priests and all the people of the land who passed between the parts of the calf. Verse 20, and I shall give them into the hand of their enemies and into the hand of those who seek their life, and their corpses shall be for food to the birds of the heavens and the beasts of the earth. So with the word karat, we understand either the covenant is cut out or cut off from both, because the word karat can mean both the same way. Because if you see Genesis 17 verses 14, when Yahuwah gave the covenant of circumcision, it says, that an uncircumcised male child who is not circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin, his life shall be cut off. That same word karat, all right, H3772, from his people, he has broken my covenant, right? So he has broken my covenant, and that's the reason Yahuwah will cut him off. That's what it says. So Shaul the emissary reasoned that circumcision profits if one obeys Torah, but if one is a transgressor of Torah, his circumcision has become uncircumcision. Remember, circumcision was also a cut out covenant, and if not kept would result in being cut off. And karat is used in both coming in and going out of a covenant, because once cut off, that person cannot come in again into that same covenant. So if Yahuwah cuts a person off, karat, from the covenant, then that person cannot come back into that same covenant. Romans chapter 2 verses 25 to 26, for circumcision indeed profits if you practice the Torah, but if you are a transgressor of the Torah, your circumcision has become uncircumcision. So if an uncircumcised one watches over the righteousness of the Torah, shall not his uncircumcision be reckoned as circumcision? So the uncircumcision becomes circumcision if one watches over the righteousness of the Torah, not that he would live in an uncircumcised state. Shaul the emissary gave Abraham as an example of watching over the righteousnesses of the Torah when he was still uncircumcised in the flesh. The seal of righteousness came to him later, confirming his circumcision of his heart. So Genesis 15 instance of Yahuah passing through the animal pieces in cutting out a covenant with Abraham and his seed was when Abraham was uncircumcised in the flesh and had no son yet. The cut out covenant came to him as stated in Genesis chapter 17 when he was named as Abraham, because formerly he was called as Abram. So similarly, when a certificate of divorce was given, which is a cut-off covenant, the wife who would marry another man had no option ever to return to her first husband, and this we read in Deuteronomy chapter 24 verses 4. So when Yahusha was confronted with a quote from this text, this is what he said. So we'll read a few passages from the Bashara of Matthew chapter 19 verses 3 to 11. All right. It says, some Pharisees came to him, testing him and asking, is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife for any reason at all? And he answered and said, have you not read that he who created them from the beginning made them male and female? Verse 5, and said, for this reason a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. Verse 6, so they are no longer two but one flesh. What therefore the Elohim has joined together, let no man separate. Verse 7, they said to him, why then did Moses give to her a certificate of divorce and send her away? Verse 8, he said to them, because of your hardness of your heart, Moses permitted you to divorce your wives, but from the beginning it has not been this way. Verse 9, and I say to you, whoever divorces his wife except for harlotry and marries another woman commits adultery. Okay, the disciples said to him, if the relationship of the man with his wife is like this, it is better not to marry. Verse 11, but he said to them, not all men can accept this statement, but only to whom it is given in an oath. Now your translation would say, but only to whom it is given, and that's it. It will stop over there, because the translation is lost from the Greek to the English translation, because Greek does not incorporate the word oath, which both the Khabaris, which is the oldest Aramaic translation, as well as the Hebrew translation uses the word Elah. All right. So if you see, this is the Aramaic word Elah, and this is the Hebrew word Elah. All right, which means oath, howl, lament, aloud, wail. So the essence of what is being said here is lost, like I said, in the Greek to English translation, because in the English translation it plainly says not all receive this word, but only those to whom it has been given. So if we read what Mashiach said on a surface level, we see a higher standard in morality as compared to the Torah of sin and death, but there is a deeper spiritual meaning to what Mashiach Yahusha said, which needs a little digging and spiritual versus spiritual comparison. Elah in Aramaic is also used for Elohim. All right, remember the book of Ezra and certain chapters from the book of Daniel, all right, were found written in Aramaic, and there Elah is used for Elohim. So it is Elohim who came under the oath, right? And who is our Elohim? Our Elohim is Yahusha HaMashiach. Okay, so Matthew 19 verses 11, all right, it clearly shows that only he reserved the right to divorce, because only he is perfect and never ever sinned or never became unfaithful to his bride. All right. So if you read the preceding verses, all right, man was never to put out his wife with a certificate of divorce. It was a command only meant for Yahuah, and that also we will see how Yahuah in his wisdom, all right, remarries the renewed bride, all right, in himself as the transition form as Yahusha HaMashiach. Okay, so divorce according to Torah of life was not permitted at all for mankind, and whoever understood the commandment literally were fleshly, but Yahusha reveals to us what divorce and remarriage is all about. It was a command only to him who was put under the oath, right? As stated in Matthew chapter 19 verses 11, only he reserved the right to divorce because only he is perfect and never sinned, and he never became unfaithful to the bride. The bride was unfaithful and became a whore. That's the reason he had to give her a certificate of divorce and send her away. So scripture uses two words which define a perspective, one from YasharEL point of view and one from Yahuah's point of view. And the two words for husband, all right, are Baal and Ishi. So if you read Yahu chapter 31 verses 32, it says, "Not according to the covenant which I made with their fathers in the day I took them by the hand to bring them out of the land of Egypt, my covenant which they broke, although I was a husband to them, declares Yahuah." So this is talking about the renewed covenant that Yahuah will conclude with the house of YasharEL as well as Yehuda, not a new covenant. If we say it is a new covenant, it is disconnected from what is in the old, right? So it is utter nonsense to say that it is a complete new covenant without understanding the Old Testament and how the renewed covenant, that is the New Testament, which they say, all right, is connected to the Old Testament. That's the reason it is a renewed covenant. And there are people who say new, everything is made new. All right, they are just like Gideons. Just give out the New Testament, and Old Testament is history, wormhole, all this utter nonsense you will hear from these people. Okay, so Isaiah chapter 54 verses 5, "For your husband is your maker, whose name is Yahuah Sabaoth, and your redeemer is the set apart one of YasharEL, who is called the El of all the earth." So the word for husband used over here, as well as in Yahu chapter 31 verses 32, is Baal, which is Strong's H1166. This is in Paleo Hebrew, Baal, right? So YasharEL after the flesh likened Yahuah as the lords, masters or husbands on earth, and that was their perspective. But Yahuah says they will no longer call him Baali, or he will remove the name of Baals from their mouth, and they will call him Ishi. Alright, we can read this in Hosea chapter 2 verses 16 and 17. "And it shall be in that day, declares Yahuah, that you shall call me Ishi." This is the Paleo Hebrew word Ishi, S376, "and shall no longer call me Baali," alright, that which means my Lord or my master or my husband. Right, verse 17, "For I shall remove the names of Baalim." Baalim is in plural, so all those titles, my Lord, my husband, my maker, all right, all that will be removed from our mouth, so that they shall be mentioned by their names no more. And by what title will he be known? As Ishi. All right, that's what it says over here in Hosea. And Ishi has got the root word ash, which means fire. Also has the root word ash again, which means fire. And Ishi is spelled as Aleph, Yod, Shin, Yod. And it has the root word ash, which means fire. It's no wonder that Moses saw the bush burning with fire and yet was not consumed. Exodus chapter 3 verses 2, "The angel of Yahuah appeared to him in a blazing fire, ash, from the midst of the bush. And he looked, and behold, the bush was burning with fire, yet the bush was not consumed." All right. And in Hosea chapter 2 verses 19, it says, "I shall betroth you to me forever. Yes, I shall betroth you to me in righteousness and in justice, in loving kindness and in compassion." So the word for betrothed is arashat, right, or arash. So this is the word in uh, Proto-Canaanite Hebrew, all right, which means request or betroth, or if you see over here, it says espouse, betroth, request. So, didn't Shaul the emissary say in 2 Corinthians 11 verses 2, "For I am jealous for you with the jealousy of Elohim, for I have betrothed you to one husband," that is Ishi, or yes, so that to the Mashiach I might present you as a pure virgin. So the one whom we are betrothed to is that husband, Yahusha HaMashiach. So Shaul the emissary said that he has betrothed the assembly to one husband. All right, the husband is only one, all right, not two, not Yahuah and Yahusha, not two persons. All right? They are the one and the same person. The one who has transitioned and arrived is Yahusha HaMashiach. Malachi chapter 3 verses 17, they shall be to me, says Yahuwah Sabaoth, on the day that I prepare my treasure, and I shall spare them as a husband has pity on his own son who serves him. Now they have translated this as man, all right, because like a woman says, this is my man, okay, so my husband. So that same word Ishi is used. So we need to understand what that man is all about. Okay, the man who is also the father, all right, because Yahuwah was both father and husband to YasharEL, and we can see this in Malachi chapter 3 verses 17. When we understand both the fatherhood and the husband relationship of Yahuwah to YasharEL, it makes perfect sense. So Yahuwah placed the relationship of the husband above his fatherhood, because through this relationship he would be one flesh with YasharEL, reconciling them all back to his fatherhood. I know this may not make sense yet, so hold on. Genesis chapter 2 verses 24. Therefore, an husband, that same word Ishi is used, all right, shall leave his father and his mother and be joined to his wife, and they shall become into one flesh. Now the word Ishi and Asha for husband is Ishi, and for wife is they say Isha or Asha, all right, have the root word ash, which means the fire, all right. Here Asha means fire, and the two will become one flesh. Is it a coincidence that Asha means fire offering? So if you read Exodus chapter 29 verses 25, all right, here Asha is also called as a fire offering. You shall take them from their hands and offer them in a smoke on the altar on burnt offering for a soothing aroma before Yahuwah. It is a fire offering. It is an Asha to Yahuwah. Ephesians 5 verses 29 to 31. For no one ever hated his own flesh, but nourishes and cherishes it, even as the master also does the assembly, because we are members of his body, of his flesh, and of his bones. For this reason, a husband shall leave his father and mother and shall be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. Quoting Genesis chapter 2 verses 24, the emissary Shaul says that we are members of the body of Mashiach and are of his flesh and of his bones, speaking of the husband leaving his father and mother to join his Asha or wife to be one flesh with her. And in this we see Yahuwah, who became Yahusha, leaving his fatherhood and leaving the heavenly Jerusalem, the mother of us all, to enjoin with us to be one flesh with him, to reconcile us to his fatherhood in the fire offering made as a sweet smelling aroma. So the Asha is hidden in him, of his flesh and of his bones. With this we can understand what Elohim meant when he said, "Let us make man in our image, according to our likeness, and let them rule over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the air and over the cattle and over all the earth and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth." Elohim created Aleph Tau, man in his own image. In the image of Elohim he created them, male and female he created them. So our likeness, all talks about plurality, all right. So He left his fatherhood, all right, and mother Jerusalem, and came down to be one flesh with us. All right, so that the two shall become one flesh. Hallelujah. Such beautiful salvation plan. Genesis 5:2, he created them male and female and blessed them and called their name Adam in the day when they were created. Now, Adam is not a name, it's actually a title for mankind, called their name Adam. So the image of Elohim is Mashiach, who is husband and whom is hidden the wife. The wife was taken from the man. So Genesis 2:21, so Yahuah Elohim caused a deep sleep to fall upon man, and he slept, and he took one of his sides. Alright, the word they have translated as ribs is actually side, Sala, and closed up the flesh at that place. The Abari word Sala, alright, means side, which has the root word Sal, which means shadow, and the same word is rooted in Salam, which means image. So these are the words in Proto-Canaanite Hebrew. Right, Sal means shadow, and Sala has got the letters Sad, Lamed, Ain. The shadow that can be seen is Salam, right, which is the image. Alright, Sad, Lamed, Sal, Mem, shadow of the deep. So that is the image that we see over here. So the woman is the shadow or reflection of the man, and hence a woman needs to have the fullness of Mashiach likeness in her. So when we read 1 Corinthians 11 verses 7 to 10, it says, for a man ought not to have his head covered, since he is the image and esteem of Elohim, but the woman is the esteem of man. Verse 8, for the man is not of the woman, but the woman of the man. Neither was the man was created for the woman, but the woman for the man. Therefore the woman ought to have a symbol of authority on her head because of the messenger. So the woman is the esteem of man. Alright, she is as his shadow. Alright, and the man is created after the image of Elohim, and we know that Colossians says that he is the image of the invisible Elohim, speaking about Yahusha Mashiach. So when we understand the deep roots and the reflection of it in a marriage, it's impossible to divorce your own flesh and bones. You cannot separate your own flesh and bones, the one whom you are one flesh with. The scripture, Matthew 19:9, except for harlotry, is only reserved for Yahusha, because Matthew 9 verses 11 clearly says that not all men can accept this statement, but only to whom is put under an oath. So the creator of all the heavens and the earth, alright, brought himself under that oath, Elah, alright, to set his bride free from harlotry. So man is not in a position to accept the teaching of Yahusha unless he sees what Yahusha did for us. So we read in Deuteronomy 24:1-4, when a husband puts away his wife and she marries another, and a latter husband puts her away or dies, she cannot return to her first husband. But see what Yahuah says to YasharEL, Jeremiah chapter 3 verses 1. What does it say? He says, if a husband puts away his wife and she goes from him and belongs to another man, shall he still return to her? Shall not the land be completely polluted? But you are an harlot with many lovers, yet you turn to me, declares Yahuah. So a carnal mind or fleshly mind will always see a contradiction, because they do not understand Deuteronomy chapter 24 verses 1-4. That's the reason they keep saying new covenant, without understanding that the covenant was renewed. Alright, it was the creator who transitioned forms. Alright, so the Torah of life was always existent from before. Alright, that Yahuah in his plan had the man and his wife to be of one flesh and one bone. Okay, that is how he sees them before him. So this was allowed by Moses because of the hardness of their heart, But with Yahuah it was not so. Only he reserved the right to divorce and remarry, and let's see how he did it and whom did he marry. So when we read Romans chapter 7 verses 1 to 4, it says, or do you not know, brethren, for I speak to them who know the law, that the Torah has dominion over a man as long as he lives. Verse 2, for the married woman is bound by Torah to her husband while he is living. But if her husband dies, she is released from the law of her husband. Verse 3, so then if while her husband is living, she is joined to another man, she shall be called an adulteress. But if her husband dies, she is free from the Torah, so that she is not an adulteress, though she is joined to another man. Verse 4, therefore, my brethren, you also were made to die to the Torah through the body of Mashiach, so that you might be joined to another, to him who was raised from the dead, in order that we might bear fruit to Elohim. So the Ruach is showing us from Yirmiyahu chapter 3 verses 1 and Romans chapter 7 verses 1 to 4 that woman who was divorced by Yahuah for harlotry was bound to the Torah while her husband was still living. But her husband Yahusha was put to a deep sleep, just as Adam was put to a deep sleep, and she was released from the law of her husband to remarry the one who was raised from the dead. So the carnal and the whore was divorced and was remarried to the spiritual. The husband who was Baal to her was now her Ishi. Alright, so Colossians 3 verses 3, for you have died and your life is hidden with Mashiach in Elohim. So the woman taken out from Adam was naked as he was, but the woman taken from the Ishi Mashiach was clothed with the headship of Mashiach. And Genesis 2:25, and they were both naked, the man and his wife, and were not ashamed. Genesis 3:21, Yahuah Elohim made coats of skin for Adam and for his wife and clothed them. So the word for coats is katan, which has the root word kat, and the root word in katanat means crushed. So katan, if you see here, it's a coat, right? And this is the root word kat, which means to crush. So it also the word or, alright, is called naked or skin. So the skin is exposed, the flesh is exposed. That's what it means. Alright. So that's the reason we are going to be transformed into the body of Yahusha HaMashiach, because he is from the renewed creation order. After the renewed creation order, in the newness of the letter, that's what it says. So it's not a new covenant as people teach, but it is the same covenant and enjoined to us in the same purpose that Yahuah had. The intention was always eternal. Alright, the commandment which came, alright, which was supposed to give life, brought death because people didn't understand the commandment. The fault was with them because they did not understand the commandment, and that's the reason they divorced. Alright, they exposed their skin, they exposed their nakedness, and they were not ashamed. That's what it shows. Alright, they were not ashamed, and that's the reason Adam and Eve, the moment they were confronted with a testing, alright, and they failed that test, they immediately knew that their skin is bare, they are naked, and that they need a covering, and they sewed fig leaves and they covered themselves. But Yahuah made for them coats of skin, katan. Alright, he paid the price to cover their nakedness. In katan, kat means crushed, right, and nun is also the seed. So or is the nakedness. So we see a picture of Adam and Yahuah, that is Eve, with crushed seeds, all right, in their nakedness, with their flesh being bare, all right, and that seed, that is Mashiach, who would come to redeem the womb, will clothe them and cover their nakedness, because he'll transform them into his body. That was the plan of Yahuah. Matthew 27:28, they stripped him, that is Yahusha, of his own garments and put a scarlet robe on him. John chapter 19 verses 23, then the soldiers, when they had impaled Yahusha, took his outer garments and made 4 parts, a part to every soldier, and also the tunic. Now the tunic was seamless, woven from the top throughout. So they couldn't tear off that inner garment of Yahusha. Alright? It was only the outer garment that they made 4 parts, and they distributed among themselves. They cast lots for it. So it is a clear picture of Yahusha was never naked. Alright, so he took our nakedness upon himself, and that's why it says 1 Corinthians 6 verses 15 to 17, do you not know that your bodies are members of Mashiach? Shall I then take away the members of Mashiach and make them members of a harlot? May it never be. Verse 16, or do you not know that the one who joins himself to a harlot is one body with her? For he says the two shall become one flesh. Verse 17, but the one who joins himself to the Adon is one ruach with him. So YasharEL after the flesh was divorced by Yahuah because of unfaithfulness. YasharEL went into idolatry and harlotry, as they couldn't see the ruach in the letter, but Yahuah never forsook his people. He divorced the carnal, but YasharEL of ruach was whom he remarried in a transition form. 2 Corinthians chapter 5 verses 16 and 17, therefore from now on we recognize no one according to the flesh, because the flesh will bring forth the nakedness. We saw that word, right? Or, which is naked, skin, which is bare. Even though we have known Mashiach according to the flesh, because he came in that likeness of sinful flesh, but not exactly, you could say as us. There was no sin in him, and that's the reason he is the only one capable, to transition us into himself, because right now we are one ruach with him, and when we will be transformed into his body, then we shall be one, as of his flesh and of his bones. Alright? And that flesh is heavenly, not earthy, which is naked. It says, even though we have known Mashiach according to the flesh, yet now we know him in this way no longer. Verse 17, therefore if anyone is in Mashiach, he is a renewed creature. The old things are passed away. Behold, all things have become new. Alright, so the renewal, is in the in understanding what the eternal purpose of Yahuah was when he gave a commandment. Alright, and you attach to that Torah of life. That is a renewed creature. If you say that you are completely new, you are detaching yourself from that eternal covenant, and you are Torah-less, because you do not understand your relationship with Yahuah in the transition form. Though you say that he's transitioned, but then you, like a beast which was given a big mouth to speak great blasphemies, you say that Yahuah is dead, Yahuah is no more, Yahuah has moved on, and it's just a wormhole, the Old Testament, just a history book. We can only use it as a reference and not obey any part of it, because it's a new commandment. It's a new, everything is new. You detached yourself. Whereas Hebrews chapter 8 clearly says that it is Yahuah who concludes the covenant with both the houses of YasharEL and Yehudah. Alright, it's the same covenant in the eternal purpose for which that commandment was made. Hebrews 10 verses 19 and 20, therefore brethren, since we have confidence into the entrance of the set apart place by the blood of Yahusha, verse 20, by a new and living way which he inaugurated for us through the veil, that is his flesh. So through his veil, that is his flesh, we have entered into the ruach. Alright, and he will transform us, because his body was transformed, isn't it? And it was glorified, or you can say full of esteem. So we will also be filled with that fullness of his esteem, into that glorified body. Okay, I've covered all this. 1 John 3:2, beloved, now we are the sons of Elohim, and it has not yet appeared as yet what we shall be, but we know that when he appears we shall be like him, because we shall see him as he is. So being one ruach with him, we can enjoin ourselves to a harlot? Not at all. For they who join themselves to a harlot become one flesh with her, for the two shall become one flesh, he says. So how can we who are justified by favor be perfected by the Torah of sin and death? Shaul told the Galatian assembly, are you foolish, having begun in the ruach, are you now being perfected by the flesh? So the commandment was eternal, and the ruach in the commandment was there. All right, so I'm in no way leading you to the carnal commandment, but I'm leading you to the renewed command, all right, which had an eternal purpose concealed in it. All right, so that you need to understand what I mean by saying renewed command or renewed covenant. Yahuah has handed the old pattern, which is in carnal ordinances, to Ha-Shatan, and that's the reason Ha-Shatan is trying to utilize the evil in the flesh that we have, all right, to rebel against the eternal purpose or the eternal commandment by giving a wrong understanding of the scriptures. When you say that you see everything is new, and you are detaching yourself from the one who loved you and gave himself for you. Marriage is honorable in all, and the marriage bed is to be undefiled. For fornicators and adulterers Elohim shall judge. Hebrews 13 verses 4. So this marriage in Mashiach, all right, who is in the transition form, is to be understood that it is incorruptible, undefiled, all right, and those who detach themselves from under this particular understanding from scripture are fornicators and adulterers, and you shall be judged. Okay, now there are many people who misinterpret 1 Corinthians 7 verses 15, saying, yet if the unbelieving one leaves, let him leave. The brother or sister is not under bondage in such cases, but Elohim has called us to peace. So they teach that, if the unbelieving husband or wife leaves, they can remarry. It doesn't say that at all, because it says that the brother or sister is not under bondage in such cases. The bondage is not of putting away the spouse. They can put away the spouse in such cases because of the unbelief in Mashiach. So if Shaul the emissary was teaching remarriage, why would Shaul say in the same chapter in verse 39, it says, a wife is bound by the law as long as her husband lives, but if her husband is dead, she is free to be married to whom she wishes, only in the Adon. Alright, so which means that the unbelieving wife is bound even to the husband, the believing wife is bound to her unbelieving husband even after she has separated herself from him. Alright, and she cannot remarry. She has to remain in that position. But once the husband is dead, she is free to marry whom she wishes, but only in the Adon. That means she can only now take a believing husband. That's what the scripture says. So Shaul was not at all teaching that you're not in bondage, just divorce your unbelieving spouse and go and get married. That was transgressing the commandment, the eternal purpose of that commandment. So the spiritual commandment was only for Mashiach, who was under an oath to divorce the Jerusalem after the flesh and remarry Jerusalem after the Ruach by transforming his remnant. And that is why the covenant is renewed and not new altogether. The lawgiver has the right to buy back the harlot who went after many lovers as his wife by renewing her and purifying her, and that too in his wisdom. he transitioned and made this possible. So when she is purified and comes to Yahusha, she acknowledges that he is the same husband as she recognizes his former estate. So Yahuah, before sending Yehuda into captivity, reiterates the Torah portion which I already read, Yirmiyahu chapter 3 verses 1, that would you return to me? The answer is they couldn't, because it's impossible that Yahuah will break that commandment. So what he did, in his wisdom, he changed his form into an order of bringing them back to be in a position to renew the wedding vows with them. That's what he did, such wisdom of Elohim. Alright, the commandment without destroying or without transgressing the commandment. Alright, he fulfilled it because he's marrying the same bride but in a transition form. Alright, he moved on in a sense that into a last estate from his former estate. But can we forget his former estate? Not at all. Didn't Thomas say when he touched his wounds, my Yahuah, my Elohim? So he acknowledges first estate. That's what happens. Similarly, the wife, when she comes to her husband, alright, she realizes the deep love that her husband has for him, and she acknowledges that you are my husband from beginning. You are Yahuah, and how did I miss that? Thank you for loving me and thank you for paying the price for me. So that kind of gratitude has to be there in us. It's not that you're marrying a new husband altogether in a new covenant, new marriage, new vow, transgressing against the commandment of Yahuah, which he meant only for himself. And in that way you are showing that you are in a divorce state because you are marrying somebody, alright, who is come with a different kind of commandment, different set of rules. Now this is interesting. YasharEL chapter 46 verses 9 and 10. Remember the former events of old, for I am El and there is no one else. Elohim, and there is no one like me. Verse 10, declaring the end from the beginning and from old that which has not yet been done, saying my counsel does stand and all my delight I do. Now the word zakar, alright, which is translated as remember, also means a memorial. So the one of the family that remembers and passes down the family history through story and family name, right? That's a memorial. And the one who acts and speaks for the family, the male, man, child, mankind, him, alright, he is called as zakar. Okay, so that commandment, alright, was eternal, passed on from all generations, right from the beginning in its intended purpose. That's what it means. So that's the reason, remember the former, the rashayat of old. So the word used for old, translated as old, is olam, which means a vanishing point from the past to a new appearance or eternity. So you move from one position to another, and when you come to another position, you acknowledge, oh, he's the same Yahuah, I just seen him there, and now he's in the new form. Because the Ruach is the one who quickens your heart to understand that it is an eternal commandment, and now I'm a renewed creature in him, alright, who loved me and gave himself for me, and now who's come to the last position as a Karon. So the word Rashayat, alright, is a beginning or genesis of someone, and in this case it is Yahusha, who is Yahuah himself. Okay, and Akaron, I'm sorry, I didn't pay attention to this. Akaron or Akaryat is the end or last state of someone, and in this case it is Yahusha, who is Yahuah. Alright, so we are talking about this word, declaring the end, H319. It is the word Akaryat. Alright, just as Rashiyat, it is Akaryat. I'll change this in the note. I'll paste the note in the video as well for your reference. So those who only believe in a new covenant are detached from the first estate of all things, and that's why they say things as Yahuah is no more. I already told you, Old Testament table is worm filled. They say worm filled carcass eaten by many today. Old Testament is history, the wormhole. So this beast has been given a great mouth, speaking blasphemies against the Most High. But those who understand that the covenant is renewed and see that it was Yahuah himself who went through those pieces of animals as a smoking oven and flaming torch, sealing a cut-out covenant to Abraham and his seed, are the ones who acknowledge both his former as well as his last estate. It's a memorial. That is why Yahusha makes the same claim as Yahuah, that he is the Rishon and Akaron. In YasharEL chapter 41 verses 4, Yahuah says, who has performed and done it, calling the generations from the beginning. I, Yahuah, am the Rishon and the last ones, Akaronim. It's in plural. I am he. So Yahusha calls himself as the beginning of creation of Elohim, where Revelation 3 verses 14 uses the word Rashayat Barayat, alright, which means he is the beginning of the covenanted creation and not beginning of a creation. So it's a covenanted creation. He is the beginning of a covenanted creation. The headship has to be understood in this way. Revelation 3 verses 14 is where we read, and to the messenger of the assembly in Laodicea write, the Aman, the trustworthy and true witness, the first estate of the covenanted creation of Elohim. Genesis 1:1, in the beginning, alright, is the same word Rashayat. Elohim created the Aleph Tau heavens and Aleph Tau earth. So Elohim created the first estate of the heavens and the earth, and the order was to show the spiritual and covenanted creation in him, because Genesis 2 verses 4 says, these are the births of the heavens and the earth in the day that Yahuah created the earth and the heavens. So the spiritual was in the natural. The natural was a typology pointing to that eternal heavens and the earth. Similarly, the commandment also, when it was given, it was spiritual, because it pointed to a fulfillment. It pointed to a journey, all right, into being transformed in Mashiach, all right, being quickened in Mashiach with an eternal purpose, all right, not after the carnality of the flesh, because the flesh, as I told you, is naked, bare, exposing your skin. But we are one ruach with Mashiach. And the next verse, Genesis 1 verses 1 and 2, it talks about the earth being formless and void, tohu and bahu, and darkness was over the face of the deep, and the ruach of Elohim was paving the way, rakapat, over the surface of the waters. Rakapat means paving the way, or fluttering over the waters, to divide the waters, ready to divide the waters. So he was foreordained to fill the emptiness of covenanted creation, while the physical earth and heavens in birth pangs stood as a type of the first estate of covenanted creation. The arrival was simultaneously because everything remained concealed in the womb in birth pangs until he rose from the dead and the womb redeemed. Even the messengers saw their Elohim bodily in his both estates when he arose from the dead and was esteemed. 1 Timothy 3 verses 16, and beyond all question, the secret of reverence is great, who was revealed in the flesh, declared right in the Ruach, was seen by messengers, was proclaimed among nations, was believed on in the world, was taken up in esteem. So, even the messengers saw their Elohim, alright, in the transition form. Colossians 1 verses 18, and he is the head of the body, the assembly, who is the beginning. Alright, again that same word, Rashayat, the firstborn from the dead, that he might become the one who is first, Rashun, in all. Alright, Kol. So he is the Rashun in all. So he fulfilled by filling all covenanted creation, by being first in all, and this was the arrival completion. So we see the same phrase, who was, who is, and he who came. Alright, now your scriptures would say who was, who is, and who is to come in the futuristic tense. But if you see the Hebrew word Yahuah, All right, the Yahuah means he came. And when we read Revelation 4 verses 8, and the four living creatures, each having six wings, were covered with eyes around and within, and they do not cease day or night, saying, set apart, set apart, set apart Yahuah El Shaddai, who was, who is, and who came, or he came. All right, that word is Yahuah. And this quote is directly from Yeshayahu chapter 6 verses 1 and 2, but Yeshayahu doesn't mention who was, who is, and who came. All right, but if you see, Yahuah in Hebrew means and he came or it came. So it's the third person masculine singular wow consecutive imperfect form of verb. The verb is ba, which means to come. The uav before the ba indicates a connecting participle, and the yod is the part of the verb's imperfect form. So the verb bua, alright, means to come. And Yahuah, if you see here, Yahuah, and he came. Okay, so it's used whenever someone enters a place, approaches, or steps into action, often a turning point in a narrative. So the examples, these are a few examples. Genesis 32 verses 8, for he said, if Esau came, again the same word Yahuah, to the one company and attacks it, then it shall be a company which is left, then it shall be the company which is left shall escape. Esther 6:6, so Haman came, Yahuah, where did he come? He came in, and the king said to him. Ezekiel 14 verses 1, and the men of elders of YasharEL came, again that same word Yahuah. So this clearly shows that this is in the past tense. Okay, for those who see it in a futuristic tense, need to understand the spiritual in the physical. If you read Psalms 118 verses 26, it says, Hoshiana to the son of David, blessed is he who is coming in the name of Yahuah. We shall bless you from the house of Yahuah. Sorry, Psalms 118:26 says, blessed is he who is coming in the name of Yahuah. We shall bless you from the house of Yahuah. So the word there is coming in the futuristic tense. Right? Now when you come to Matthew 21 verses 9, when Yahusha rode the donkey, the crowds who were before him and those followed him cried out saying, Hoshiana to the son of David, blessed is he who is coming in the name of Yahuah, Hoshiana in the highest. Alright, so who is coming? So now see the perspective. The psalmist is saying, he is coming. Now from our perspective, if you are in the crowd and shouting, blessed is he who is coming in the name of the Lord, means you are in the name of Yahuah, you are identifying that, yes, he's come. This is the one who was spoken about. Hallelujah. So beautiful it is if you understand. While the tenses used in these verses are futuristic, Matthew 21 verses 9 is to be understood as he has arrived. So this is important for us to understand as a bride, as we are able to identify his first estate when we see him arrived in the last estate. Now something very, very important, right? So if you read Numbers, all right, chapter 30 verses 9 to 12, okay, now I will read 9 to 12 and let us understand this in the commandment, all right, the eternal purpose commandment. But any vow of a widow or a divorced woman by which she has bound herself stands against her. Verse 10, and if she vowed in her husband's house or bound herself by an agreement with an oath, and her husband heard it and has kept silent towards her and did not forbid her, then all her vows shall stand, and every agreement by which she bound herself stands. But if her husband annuls them on the day he heard them, then whatever came from her lips concerning her vows or concerning the agreement binding her, it does not stand. Your husband has nullified them, and Yahuah pardons her. Alright, so a divorced woman's vows are made to stand or established. Remember, Yahuah gave YasharEL a certificate of divorce. We read that in Yahuah chapter 3 verses 8. But it says if she made those vows in her husband's house, that's the text that we are reading, and her husband heard her and kept silent and did not forbid her, then those vows stand or are established. But if he nullified those vows or the agreement that bound her when he heard them, then it doesn't stand, as the husband nullified them and Yahuah forgives her. So the word translated as nullified is a repetitive word, which is parar, parar. Can you see this here? Parar, parar. In the text of Numbers chapter 30 verses 12. The verse should read as, but if a husband utterly voided them on Aleph Tau the day he heard them, then whatever came from her lips concerning her vows or concerning the agreement binding her, it does not stand. Her husband has nullified parar them and Yahuah pardons her. Parar means utterly break the vows the divorced woman or the widow, that is YasharEL, was made in her husband's house as she entered into the blessings and curses as stated in Deuteronomy chapter 28. And when you read Deuteronomy chapter 11 and Joshua chapter 8 verses 33, in Deuteronomy 11 Moses commands YasharEL when they enter the promised land, alright, 6 tribes should stand on Mount Gerizim and proclaim the blessings that are in the written Torah, and 6 tribes standing on Mount Ebal should proclaim the curses written on Mount Ebal. Those who are standing on Mount Ebal written in the Torah, so they should proclaim the curses. So that clearly shows that YasharEL bound themselves by an oath when in the promised land in Yahuah's house, and later on he divorced them, right? That's what we read. So you can read this text later. We are already crossing 1 hour, so I won't read these verses, but you can read the text in Deuteronomy chapter 11 and Joshua chapter 8, which is a fulfillment of the instruction given by Moses, the man of Elohim. And also we read Genesis 17 verses 14, and an uncircumcised male child who is not circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin, his life shall be cut off, karat, from his people. He has broken, parar, Aleph Tau, my covenant. So once you are cut off, you cannot come back, alright, into that same covenant, the written code. You cannot come into that written code. Okay, this is the warning that was given, Deuteronomy chapter 31 verses 16. And Yahuah said to Masha, see, you are about to sleep with your fathers, and this people shall rise and whore after the mighty ones of the strangers of the land, into the midst of which they shall enter, and forsake me, and break, that same word parar, Aleph Tau, my covenant, which I have cut out, karat, with them. Right, so that is what is going to happen, was foretold by Yahuah to Moses, alright, before his death. Now coming back to the Numbers 30 text, the onus was on the husband to bear her crookedness, because it says in verse 15, alright, it says, but if he nullifies them after he has heard, then he shall bear Aleph Tau, her crookedness. So that same word for nullify is parar, parar, repetitive words. Alright, so it says that if he, who he? The husband, alright, utterly nullifies the words of the oath made by his wife while in his house before she was divorced. We are talking about the divorced woman, right? And after he has heard them, then he shall bear Aleph Tau, her crookedness. He shall bear her crookedness. Alright, so the word at the same time it says, if a husband is altogether silent, alright, again the word kharash, kharash, here a different word is used for silent, kharash, kharash, but a repetitive word. Alright, whenever Yahuah uses a repetitive word, it is something of utmost importance, as even Yahusha said, he who has ears, let him hear. Verily, verily, I say unto you. So twice, Babylon, Babylon is fallen, isn't it? Twice. So something important that needs to be grasped, alright, is what is being said over here. So if the husband is silent, all right, at her from the day to day, then he confirms all her vows or all the agreements that bind her. He confirms them because he kept silent towards her on the day that he heard them. So this is the what happens, the separation, all right, of the fleshly YasharEL and the Ruach YasharEL, because he remained silent for those who were not chosen by him from YasharEL when they entered into the vow, and that's the reason they were dispersed and they went into destruction. They are reserved for eternal destruction. But for those whom he loved and chose from the foundation of the world, all right, he nullified, all right, again the word parar, them after he has heard, and then he shall bear their crookedness, her crookedness, it says. So didn't Yahusha bear our crookedness upon himself? Isn't that amazing? So Kharash is peace, plow, device, silence, hold, altogether plowman, seize, conceal, deaf. So giving a deaf ear, all right, to her vows. So he gave a deaf ear to the vows of the carnal YasharEL. Okay. Now this is what is interesting, and I will close with this. Psalms chapter 74 verses 12 and 13. It says, these are both, now I'm going to read two texts from Psalm 74 and Psalm 77. Both are written by Asaph, all right, who was the chief musician. It says, Psalm 74 verses 12, for Elohim is my sovereign from of old, working deliverance in the midst of the earth. Verse 13, you divided, see the word parar over here, you divided the sea, referring to the Red Sea, by your might. You broke the heads of the sea serpents in the waters. All right, the sea serpents refers to whom? The Mitzrayites, right? Who are the like serpents, the children of destruction. He destroyed their heads, all right, in the waters. So in his maskil, Asaph says in his praise to Yahuah, you divided the sea by your might, referring to the Red Sea. Now let's read his text from Psalms chapter 77 verses 19 and 20. It says, your way was in the sea and your path in the great waters, and your footsteps were not known. Verse 20, you did lead your people like a flock by the hand of Moshe and Aaron. So it says, Yahuah, referring your as Yahuah, your way was in the sea, your path in that great waters, means he walked with them in those great waters, yet his footsteps were not known by YasharEL. So beautiful. This is confirmed by Shaul the emissary. Doesn't he say that verse 1 Corinthians chapter 10 verses 1 to 4, for I do not wish you to be ignorant, brothers, that all our fathers were under the cloud, and all passed through the sea, and all were immersed unto Moshe, that is Moses, in the cloud and in the sea, and all ate the same spiritual food. Verse 4, and all drank the same spiritual drink, for they drank of that spiritual rock that followed, and the rock was Messiah or Mashiach. So Psalm 74 and Psalm 77 are both written by Asaph, and he first says in Psalm 74 verses 13 that you, referring to Yahuah, divided the Red Sea by your might. And in Psalm 77 verses 19 he says, your, referring to Yahuah, your way was in the sea and your path in the great waters, and your footsteps were not known. This is clear that Yahuah himself was walking through the parting of the Red Sea, which all the emissary likens to all were immersed into Moshe or Moses, referring to the Torah of sin and death in oaths, in the cloud and in the sea. Shaul the emissary goes on to give an identity of Yahuah who followed them, and he says that it was the rock who was Mashiach. So this is clear for us to understand that since Mashiach followed them as the messenger of Yahuah, or the angel or messenger of his presence who bore the name Yahuah, would have stood on Mount Ebal and Mount Gerizim, where YasharEL, while in his house before being divorced, made the vows and he nullified them. But did he nullify it for all? No, only for the remnant. So the onus was on the husband that he once he nullifies the oaths of the wife made in his house, he would bear her crookedness, and that's exactly what he did, beloved. So, in summary, he saw the Torah's deeper meaning, Deuteronomy 24 verses 1 to 4, while appearing to permit divorce, holds a spiritual truth. The letter kills, but the Ruach gives life, revealing Yahuah's covenantal plan. Certificate of divorce, Kariyatut, represents a covenantal cutting off paralleled with sacrificial acts like Abraham's covenant, Genesis 15 symbolizing Yahuah's commitment to his people. Third point, Yahuah's covenant with Abraham. So Yahuah's passing through animal pieces signifies a promise fulfilled in Yahusha, pointing to the renewed Jerusalem, not an immediate physical land inheritance. Alright, so the setting free of the captives is, being totally freed from this body of sin and death when we are transformed into his body. Yahusha's role as a husband, Ishi, Yahuah divorces the carnal YasharEL for harlotry and remarries the spiritual YasharEL, fulfilling Torah by dying and rising to release his bride from the law of sin and death. Romans chapter 7 verses 1 to 4, and he does that in his transition form as Yahusha. Husband terminology, Baal reflects YasharEL's carnal view of Yahuah as a master, while Ishi, rooted in fire, signifies an intimate eternal bond fulfilled in Yahusha, as we read in Hosea chapter 2 verses 16 and 17. One flesh unity, marriage symbolizes Yahuah and YasharEL becoming one flesh. Yahusha leaves his fatherhood to join his bride, reconciling her through his sacrifice, Ephesians 5 verses 29 to 31. Woman as reflection, the wife, that is Ashar, derived from the husband's side, reflects his image, and YasharEL as the bride is hidden in Yahusha, clothed in his righteousness, 1 Corinthians chapter 11 7 verses 7 to 10. Divorce and redemption, Yahuah as Ishi reserves the right to divorce and remarry YasharEL, nullifying her carnal vows and bearing her crookedness to purify her as Yahusha. Numbers 30 verses 9 to 15, Jeremiah chapter 3 verses 1. Renewed covenant, Yahusha as Yahuah renews the covenant, not abolishing it, by transitioning YasharEL from the flesh to Ruach, affirming his eternal identity as the first and the last. Isaiah chapter 46 verses 9 and 10, Revelation 3 verses 14. Spiritual transformation, believers joined to Yahusha become one Ruach, transformed from fleshly harlotry to a purified bride destined to reflect his image. 1 Corinthians 6 15 to 17 and 1 John chapter 3 verses 2. Nullification of vows, Yahusha as husband nullifies YasharEL's carnal vows made under Torah, bearing her iniquity to redeem her, as seen in the parting of the sea and Mount Ebal and Gerazim, Psalms chapter 74 verses 13, 1 Corinthians 10 verses 1 to 4, as he was the rock who followed them, making his footsteps known, and he took her crookedness, as the commandment said, that if he nullifies the vows, then he shall bear her crookedness, and that's exactly what he did. This is all I have to share with you, beloved. So please feel free to write in the comments, and if you have not understood, I'll also place this note in as a link on YouTube in this study. Yahuah Barakyu, Yahuah Uza Yahusha, like forever and ever in both his estates, Barakyu. And I believe that you will be transformed and acknowledge even his first estate. Hallelujah. Shalom.